So the Pixel 9 series got some really interesting information. And I was basically describing it's really interesting how they're maneuvering themselves inside the camera world, sensor world, when it comes to that type of hardware in the device, right? Because famously, they used a 12 megapixel sensor. Let's see, for the Pixel 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I think Pixel 6 is when they jumped to that 48 megapixel sensor. So they stuck with, they loved this 12 megapixel sensor. They stuck with it for 5 years, 5 generations. Now, why did they stick with a camera for 5 years, right? You would think it would get outdated. Well, they literally squeezed every ounce of juice out of this sensor. Now, they stuck with it for so long because it was probably one of the better sensors when we look back in history as far as camera sensors that has been produced. They knew how to tweak it so well, probably better than any other company, and a lot of manufacturers use that sensor. I think it was the JN1, I believe. Sony, I don't know what IMX it was. I could look it up, but it's not that big of a deal. But Google stuck with this 12 megapixel sensor for 5 generations. And then it's seemingly in the Pixel 6, 7, 8, and now 9, it seems like they're jumping not in between, but they're consistently moving to a new sensor, not every year, because actually the sensors on the 7 and 8, I believe, are the same sensors. And now they move to a different sensor for the 9. But that's a good thing. These are really good sensors. I got the info right here. Now, and we'll look at, I have the schematics here. And if you remember this time last year, we broke down the leak of these schematics from the Pixel 8 series. So here we go. We have camera sensors. Let me expand this. We have camera sensors, and we have model numbers and everything, right? Let's start off with the Pixel 9. Now, before we start, look, it's interesting because look, Pixel 9, 9 Pro, and 9 Pro XL, and then your Fold right on the right. They use different sensors on the front selfie sensor. Just notice that. And notice this one right here. See what that says? We'll get into it. So Pixel 9, the base model, price is leaked as well. We're going to get into that here. Maybe disappointed, maybe shocked, but we'll get into it. Let's jump into this to the details of these new sensors, right? So the base Pixel 9, it's going to have a wide angle. This is the main shooter. It's going to have a wide angle Samsung G&K. That's the model number, G&K 50 megapixel wide angle sensor. That's the main shooter. Now the ultra wide is going to be also a 50 megapixel. So I have 250 megapixels on the back. Now this ultra wide on the back is going to be a Sony IMX 858. Probably as we get closer to launch, we'll break down these sensors specifically. History, are they new, are they old, who's used them before, what manufacturers, what phones have they been in before. There's a couple of model numbers on here I've never seen, so I'm assuming they're brand new, which is good. Got all the latest tech. Now, front selfie camera on the base Pixel 9, Samsung sensor 3J1, and now that is a 10.5 megapixel front selfie shooter with autofocus. Now, Pixel 9 Pro, Pixel 9 Pro XL. The only difference, and I'm so glad we got to this point, the only main difference between the Pro and Pro XL is size, right? So forever, we've been wanting Google and calling them out because we want a small Pro and a big Pro, right? Kind of like Apple does with the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, right? Why can't Google do the same thing? Because there's so many people that want a small phone, but want it spec'd out, right? When you get a small phone, we don't want like 75% of the features and hardware that the premium one does. No, give us a small one and spec it out. Well, that's what they did. So for the Pixel 9 Pro, that's the smaller one. Pixel 9 Pro XL, duh, it's the bigger one, XL. But they share the same hardware. Again, minus the screen, but you get it. But cameras, all the same. So let's jump into it, right? Starting off on the left side right here, you have a wide angle 50 megapixel Samsung G and K sensor. In the middle, you have an ultra wide 50 megapixel Sony IMX 858. And then for the telephoto lens, it's another 50 megapixel IMX 858. And then look below. Very interesting that they went with. Now, these are confirmed, right? This is confirmed. These are the specs. And this has got me very excited. This front selfie camera on the Pixel 9 Pro and Pixel 9 Pro XL, 50 megapixels, Sony IMX 858. So they're really using this 858 a lot. Look, this for the 4 cameras, or I guess 4 sensors, that's on the Pixel 9 Pro and Pro XL, including the front, 3 on the back. 3 out of the 4 is the Sony IMX 858. So that's what I'm saying. Tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, the next day, we'll specifically look up that sensor. This one we really get to nerd out, right? I'm sure some of the so-so viewers are like, really? You're going to look up a sensor? Yes. Yes, I am. In fact, well, never mind. Let's get into the Pixel Fold. Fold 2, Pixel 9 Pro Fold is the exact name, official name. This one has a little different setup, right? A little different from the other in the series. So we'll start off with on the very top right, the sensor on the top right. Now, this is an interesting layout because, as you can tell, typically a sensor, you'll look. I got a couple devices here. Samsung, you see how the main sensors are basically lined up? They're in line together. Looks nice and neat. OnePlus is not really a good example. Those are kind of lined up, but you only get 2. Anyways, you get the point. These are offset. So this top one's offset to the right, the bottom one's offset to the left. But let's get into it. So the top right sensor, you have a wide angle 64 megapixel Sony IMX 787. I am familiar with that one. Bottom right, telephoto, Samsung 10.5 megapixel 3J1 is the model name for that telephoto. And then you have an ultra wide Samsung 12 megapixel 3LU. So 12 megapixel ultra wide Samsung 3LU sensor. And then for the front selfie, you got a Samsung 10 megapixel 3K1 is the model number. Interesting, they went with a 50 megapixel on the Pro and the Pro XL, and a 10.5 for the 9, and a 10 for the Fold. I'm assuming the Pro and the Pro XL, they're going to need that extra. That's a fairly new sensor, and it looks to be heavy on the megapixel. So I'm assuming they're going to have some kind of face tracking, some kind of. I think they did that for a reason. I don't think they're just going to slap a 50 meg. When's the last time you heard about a 50 megapixel camera being in the front selfie position? Typically, it's a 10 megapixel. Typically, it's a 12 megapixel. I think I think Nothing for the Nothing Phone 2. Believe it has a 32 megapixel camera in the front. But that's the highest I've ever seen. So when that came out a year ago, I was like, damn, 32. Again, I'm not going to break down the science of it, but megapixels don't mean everything. Meaning, like, a 64 megapixel camera is necessarily not better than a 50 megapixel just because 64 is higher than 50. With what these companies are doing, very, very cool. They do binding, right? Again, I'm not going to get into the science of it, but we'll do that probably tomorrow, as I mentioned, when we look up the sensors. But Don't let it fool you. Don't be impressed by the megapixels, right? You got to do your homework and understand what these sensors are doing, because it's not all in the megapixels. But this is the highest I've seen on a phone before, unless there's a phone out there that's had like a 64 megapixel on the front, right? Now look at this. I put a little chart together here that has the main cameras and their sensors. Now, I also compare it to the Pixel 8 Pro. So the current phone, and then this year's phones. I'm sorry, the Pixel 8 here, Pixel 8 Pro here, and you have Pixel 9 and Pixel 9 Pro in the middle. So it does appear the main shooter to be the same, but the other sensors that are on there are not the same. In fact, they do get upgrades on 3 out of the 4 sensors. So that's good. So you get an upgrade on camera sensors. I can't wait to see what they got in store. I think this is going to be badass. I have a feeling, hopefully it's not much sorcery. Hopefully we don't get a lot of Harry Potter stuff. No, I don't mean literally. I mean figuratively, because last year when the Pixel 8 series was launched, they said, they showed us all this cool stuff. Pixel's going to do this, and Pixel's going to do that, and you can do this, and you can do that. And when we got the Pixels in the mail, I was like, sweet. So how do we get this going? Half the features were missing. So why did y'all even announce it? It kind of pissed me off, because I'm like, well, what if people buy the phone just because of all this cool AI stuff you're talking about, and then when it launches and you ship them to the customers, half that stuff is missing, and they said, oh, well, the auto boost video mode will be coming to consumers in 3 months. 3 months. And then something else. Well, we should have that ready for you sometime later this year. What? That's the. I wish they would stop doing that. And I know we do have I'm like 90. I'm like 95% sure. I know at least I have a couple of subscribers to this eSIM Studios YouTube channel that work for Google and or the Pixel department. So I know they can only do so much, but I just wish they would kind of cool it on the oohs and the ahs if it's not even going to be in the phone when you at launch, right? I don't know. They kind of rubbed me the wrong way last year, but it is what it is, right? So here we have the Pixel Fold, the original. Shit, I'm supposed to add. I need to crop this over when I get done here. So the new one needs to come over to the right. Pixel Fold right here needs to come over to the right. So move these two to the right. This should be the Fold 2. This shall be the Fold 1. And you can compare the sensors right there, right? So another side note before we move on. Pixel is finally getting 8K. Yes. Now, how many of y'all watching, and I want you to be honest, how many of y'all have recorded in 8K outside of just testing it, right? Because I think everybody has done that. Oh, cool, you can record in 8K, do like a little 5-10 second video. It's like a gigabyte, right, worth of data in the 10-20 seconds you record. How many of y'all have recorded outside of just a little test video? I think I've recorded once in 8K outside of just farting around. For one, the file size is too big. For two, it takes forever to transfer from your phone to your computer if you're editing. For three, nobody can watch it in 8K, so what's the point? Right? I think technically, are there 8K TVs out? Maybe.